Welcome, everyone. Glad that we are continuing into June. And I personally have taken the past week to reflect a little bit on the first 6 classes of this series and what we've done, where we've been, where we might be going. And a couple of things I wanted to introduce. First of all, we haven't done any practices that contemplative science would call bottom-up practices. So when we work with our minds and with our nervous systems, we have 2 kind of main pathways into doing that. We have bottom-up practices, which essentially are those practices that are working directly with the body to impact the functioning and the sort of regulation of the mind and the nervous system that way. And then we have top-down practices, which, as you may have guessed, go through the mind, through our more sort of executive functioning and into the body. And that's for the most part what we've been doing. We've been practicing mindfulness of breath and body. We've been doing visualization practices, compassion practices that bring to mind people or situations in our lives that we need to work with. So I thought that for the next month, I would introduce, just as a sort of introductory part of each class, a so-called bottom-up practice. So examples of these are sounding, like humming, or breath work. So not just watching our breath, but breathing intentionally in a way that will help to sort of bring on the rest and digest response of our nervous system, to calm down our nervous systems and our minds. And then we'll move into a more typical top-down practice, which is what we've been doing most of in the past 6 weeks. So I just wanted to name that. And, oftentimes we tend to jump to those top-down practices, the practices where we work on our minds to get to our bodies, because there can be an assumption that that's superior, that kind of practice is superior because it's more intricate. We're using our intellect and our focus in a certain way. And so I was able to see through the past 6 weeks a little bit of even my own bias still coming up there, doing more of the top down versus bottom up. But I think in moments that we feel really acutely stressed or anxious, or we just need to really shift out of the energy and space that we're in internally, doing something like breath work or humming or things like this, it can be a go-to, especially if there's a lack of motivation to do a more formal practice like the ones we've been doing. So I just wanted to share that. And today we'll be doing a really simple breath work practice where we'll just be inhaling through the nose and then exhaling out the mouth, making kind of a whistle sound with our teeth. Or like a hissing sound, like. And what that will do is it will extend our exhales in an easeful way, which gives the signal to our nervous system that we can rest, that we can come to a space of ease, we can slow things down. So very straightforward. And I'll be starting with that. And then I thought we'd move into a self-compassion practice that we haven't done yet. This is called the self-compassion break, and the term was coined by a psychologist named Kristin Neff. And she's one of the sort of big names in the field of compassion research and practice. And Dr. Neff identified 3 elements that make up an act or a practice of self-compassion. And those are mindfulness versus over-identification. So just being mindful of our suffering or what's going on, what's feeling challenging without being totally immersed in it. Shared common humanity. And that is noticing our relationality, our connectedness, and really working to become conscious of the fact that regardless of what challenge you might be going through, you're not completely alone in it, that it's a part of the human experience, even if the details of the experience are unique to you. That brings us out of a space of feeling isolated and alone, and perceived isolation is a really strong factor in contributing to anxiety and depressive states and things like this. And then finally, self-kindness. So self-kindness versus self-criticism, which is just flipping that switch of the unconscious tendency to sort of criticize ourselves in difficult moments and turning it around to self-kindness. So that's where we're going today. Let's get started for the sake of time. And as always, I will try to leave a few minutes at the end for questions and reflections. And please just make yourself comfortable. This is your space. I encourage you to, do what you need to do to meet your needs and get into a posture and a position that feels easeful. That could be seated or it could be reclined, whatever you need today. We'll start and end the practice with a bell. So taking a couple of deep breaths, allowing yourself to settle into your posture. If you're feeling a little bit tired or kind of sluggish in your mind, maybe allowing those breaths, especially the inhales, to invite a sort of refreshment, a freshness into your system. And if you feel on the flip side, maybe a bit scattered or imbalanced in that way, just allowing each breath as you enter the practice here to invite a sense of grounding, a sense of stability in your mind. And just taking note of where your body is in space, the temperature of the room, the feeling of the support either beneath you and behind you. And we'll begin with this conscious breathing practice, very simple. And I invite you in it to just abide by this guideline to not strain. So allow it to be easeful. Allow yourself to sense when the exhale is over, to just take the next inhale without trying to push out kind of the very bottom of the exhale. So we're not trying to force anything. We're just adding in a simple modification to our breathing to invite our nervous system into a space of calm, a space of rest, a space of ease. And we'll start by just inhaling through the nose and then exhaling through the teeth with a hissing sound like this. And then allowing the cycle to come back around organically. So at the end of the exhale, just inhaling once again through the nose. No need to strain here, just continuing at your own pace, inhaling through the nose as you typically would. And then instead of just exhaling without thinking about it, we're exhaling through the teeth, almost like it's pursed teeth instead of pursed lips. So this thin gap between top and bottom teeth, just hissing out the exhale, extending the exhale. You might even notice the sound of that sort of hissing on the exhale is also soothing to the system. So just allowing yourself to be receptive to all aspects of this breath that might feel soothing. And taking perhaps just a couple of more rounds here without needing to rush anything or get anywhere. Inhaling through the nose and then exhaling with a hiss through the teeth. And at the end of that second or third round, just allowing yourself to come back to your organic rhythm of your breathing. We only did it for a short while, but you might notice any shifts or changes you sense in the state of your mind, your body, your energy. Sometimes a little tingling or sort of buzzing and alertness, and yet a calm within that alertness. And then from this space of having arrived perhaps a bit more fully into our bodies, into this moment, I invite you to just bring to mind, bring into your awareness something that's been challenging for you lately in life, something that's been a point of tension or suffering. This could be an external situation with a person in a relationship or at work, in school. It could be a physical or emotional pain you've been managing. It could even be something in your inner world, a fear or doubt, a self-critical thought. But this first step of the self-compassion break is simply the mindfulness of whatever this thing is you've chosen to work with today. Taking a moment to recognize it for what it is, this point of tension or suffering, this challenge. No need to immerse yourself in it or get swallowed up by it, just maintaining some space. Mindfulness of the suffering, mindfulness of the tension or challenge. And then we'll gently move into this second element, the self-compassion break, recognizing our shared common humanity. So is this thing that has been kind of bothering you or causing you some suffering or pain. After having identified it, and just taking a step back and recognizing, like, aha, this experience of suffering, of challenge, I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. This is not something that is unique to me, even if the experience might be. but that the experience of facing challenges, experiencing pain or suffering in some way is part of the shared human family experience. It's something that brings you into connection with your humanness and in connection with the other people in the world who perhaps also just want to be happy, want to be free of pain or suffering. You might choose to work with the specifics of your situation. So if it is kind of a specific thing, just taking note of how there are likely other people that you may know or probably don't know who are suffering from something really similar, if not the same thing. It's not to minimize your experience, but just to recognize that to some degree we share this experience with others. We're not completely isolated in it. You might sense your heart space kind of opening to that reality. Opening to that connectedness, that shared connectedness. There's no need to try to perform or kind of push yourself then to feel better about it or push yourself out of the suffering. That's not what the practice is about. Just being there as you are with the suffering as it is, and sensing or imagining that others too experience in this way or in their own ways some degree of challenge or suffering as well. It brings us together. It connects us. If a natural sort of empathy or compassion arises for others and yourself as you contemplate this, just allow it to grow, kind of emit any sort of warmth, perhaps from the heart center. And then as we continue to soften into our experience, we shift into this third element of self-compassion, which is self-kindness rather than self-criticism. Just taking a moment to notice if there are any parts of you that have been sort of turning shame or blame or criticism back on yourself in this process of challenge or suffering when this situation in your life. And seeing if you can turn down the volume on those if they're present. And invest instead your attention in a sort of self-kindness. So this might look or feel like words of affirmation or kindness, like, I know this has been hard. I see you, I feel you. I'm here for you. We'll make it through. It could feel comforting to express self-kindness in a gesture, like placing hand at heart center. It could feel more like an energetic, just softening towards yourself. And seeing what arises when we turn down the volume on any tendency or default mode to kind of criticize ourselves when we're going through something challenging. It's the kindness you might offer a beloved or a dear friend, or even a pet, if that's easier to relate to. If they were suffering, if they were experiencing pain or challenge, opening and softening the area of the heart. Opening to a space of love, kindness, and compassion with ourselves. You're welcome to continue with this for the next minute or so, or if you'd like, if it feels like this is emerging for you already, or it's a shift you'd like to take in your practice, I invite you to bring to mind again those folks, real or imagined, folks you know or don't yet know, who may be experiencing something similar. And just open the loving kindness, the compassion that you softened into in yourself, opening it up to them. So letting that warmth kind of emanate, to radiate off your being and be shared with all those who are also suffering, perhaps in a similar way or just in their own way, maybe loved ones, maybe those who share a similarity experientially with you or an identity. Resting in kindness. Resting in warmth. Resting in the space of the heart. We'll take a few more moments here. So allowing yourself to start to seal your practice. Maybe that feels like it comes through a gesture, hand on the heart, or squeezing the tops of the knees, or giving yourself a hug. Maybe it's just taking your time to kind of soften the focus of where you've been, and taking note of any shifts you might feel in your body. Anything you've learned, anything that really landed for you, that felt supportive. And taking note, noticing, sensing again the temperature of the room, the contours of your physical body in this present moment, where the earth rises up to support you and meet you exactly where you're at. And then at the sound of the bell, coming back to our shared space. So taking your time. That is the Self-Compassion Break, inspired by Kristen Neff. She does have a recording of it on her website, which is self-compassion.org, which is just 5 minutes. So if you can imagine, I mean, that practice was 10 minutes or more, but you can actually move through those, especially once you get the practice down, in just 5 minutes. That's why it's intended to be just a break, you know, a quick, accessible break in your day. Yeah, I'm open to hearing questions, reflections. I know that in that practice, what I took through it was I've had terrible sleep all week, like not good sleep and kind of noisy neighbors and such. And the shifting point for me was in the second step of the shared common humanity. And yeah, it led me into a space of compassion for folks who have that challenge in a much bigger way than me, or more constant. So that I found that helpful. Yeah, so those 3 steps as we prepare to close here, as a reminder, it's mindfulness versus over-identification. So this is a lot of what we've been working on the past 6 weeks. Shared common humanity versus isolation. So recognizing that though our circumstances might be unique to us, the experience of feeling challenge or pain or suffering in our lives, that is part of being a human. And it's not to minimize or, you know, make your experience feel less validated, but just to recognize that we have more in common than we think, and we're not alone in it. And then self-kindness versus self-criticism. Yeah.